And our topic today is a different James Plunkett's 1969 novel Strumpet City and the 1978
1980. Well, made in the late 70s
okay
and then released in 1980.
TV series of the same name, in which he focuses on a third James Larkin, who I would say is the other statue on O'Connell Street. If you go to O'Connell Street in Dublin today, he's very, very prominent with his raised. I have T, so if I raise one arm, you raise the other.
Like this one. Yes.
Yes, it's based on a famous 1923 photo. And he's such a prominent presence on O'Connell Street that we thought it'd be worth talking about his most famous exploit, which is the 1913 Dublin lockout, which is a major event in labor history in Dublin. And since we're a literary podcast, we went the literary angle. And we learned, too, in researching this, that Plunkett was greatly influenced by James Joyce. There are many parallels of locations with Ulysses within Strumpet City. We can touch on those if we want. But more importantly, this is a story that really touched your heart when you were a young man. I would say this is what radicalized you. So there's a content warning on this one for socialism. Because we probably talk about socialism a lot because it's one of the main themes of the novel. Like it's openly about socialism. So
Yeah.
it was the most expensive RTE production to that date, and that includes shooting entirely on film.
Yeah.
And also, we haven't mentioned the star power behind this, but presumably the salaries for Peter Ustinov and Peter O'Toole.
Yeah.
So
Ustinov they got for like an afternoon to play
he
the
didn't
cosplay.
even have any lines.
No lines. He just
Glorified
walks.
extra.
Yeah, just to get his name on the
Yeah.
poster.
Plays King Edward the Seventh.
Yeah. And we see Peter O'Toole has a lot more speaking parts than I'd remembered. And he's very good when he's on screen, and he chews the scenery in a really good way. Because that's the kind of thing a man like Larkin would have done. He would have been like a big bombastic orator to project the voice to the crowd. There's no speakers or anything. Very charismatic man. But anyway, the focus of the book and the show is definitely on the proletariat and the lumpen proletariat, meaning the people below the working class. And so you have the hard-working workers who are underpaid, badly treated, struggling to unionize, suffering serious workplace injuries, and basically their families facing penury or the workhouse. And you have the lumpen proletariat, who are the slackers and the scroungers and the indigent, and great characters. There's Rashers Tierney, who everyone fell in love with, played by the famous Irish actor David Kelly. And I'll put pictures up as we talk, so don't worry. Oh, that guy. David Kelly, he looks like he's about to die in the show for real. He was 50 years old. I'm 53. Like, he's 3 years younger than me. And I can superimpose his face over mine. I mean, David Kelly must have had a hard life. I call it Borgnine syndrome because you always look like Ernest Borgnine. You never change, but you always look sort of like an Ernest Borgnine level of looks. And it's really incredible. He only died a few years ago. Like he lived to be in his 80s, I think. But yeah, very hard. Like you could tell somebody had a rough childhood, perhaps, from looking at a face that was weathered and characteristic as that. But anyway, his character would go around Dublin with his little dog. And as kids, we would watch this show. And we all fell in love with Rashers Tierney. He was
Rusty is his dog.
and Rusty, his dog, and dog was great too. That's a great dog actor. A bit like Manuel in Fawlty Towers, like all the kids would resonate with Manuel because he's always the butt of everyone's jokes and he's the bottom of the social ladder. But Rashers is just this lovely character who's very well-meaning and very idiosyncratic and has weird access to things he shouldn't have, like words like sinecure. He's, oh, Jesus, I've lost me a good sinecure. And and it's always dropping these little fragments that tell you like he's been exposed to ideas that maybe are a surprise, and then his friend Aloysius Hennessy, who is
the Toucher Hennessy.
the Toucher Hennessy, whose sole role seems to be to keep his wife pregnant, and the increasing number of children like ever like worse fed. Takes a night watchman's job because it keeps him out of his wife's bed and keeps as birth control. All this stuff all of this stuff sort of rings true to me from just the fragments that I picked up from my parents and things that they would have said about their experiences as kids, and we were 50 miles south of Dublin. We weren't even in the centre of the city or anything.
Jim Larkin, who is only like, he's, I think, on screen or on the page 3 times in the book, and 2 of them are at a distance. And the last scene where he talks to Father Giffley, that's in the book. But outside of that, he doesn't really talk to any of the main characters. He does a lot more in the TV show, but it's because they had Peter O'Toole, right?
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
Like the one that really jumps out to me is where they're on the docks and the line of the policemen are there and they're all threatening to strike, and it's like, you know, it's Joe and Pat and Fitz are all there, like, oh, you know, and it's kind of ramping up.
Yeah.
And then, like, he literally runs in behind them and puts his, he's like, we're gonna strike, boys! And then he, like, gets down the boat in the Liffey and gives a big speech. So I was like,
Yeah.
that was the only moment where it kind of took me out of it.
Yeah.
It was, like, a little bit, like, TV corny.
Right.
But I'm like, it's because they have Peter O'Toole.
Yeah,
Like,
yep.
there's no Peter O'Toole in the book. I would say, and this really, I really don't feel this from the series. One way you could really veer off from the novel is to turn this into a great man, great event historical story. Plunkett, I would guess, consciously did not do that. Jim Larkin is always a presence, but he's not a character at all. The lockout is one of many incidents, so he's very good at putting it in context and always portraying it from the viewpoint of the workers and a few middle-class characters who work in management.
Well, at least there's one good thing about religion. I don't have to ask bloody Father O'Connor's permission to talk to the higher-ups.
What higher-ups?
I mean God and His Blessed Mother and all the rest of them. As long as I'm sorry for me sins, I won't be locked out of the place above. I can hear God shouting, come on in, Rasher, sure I know your knock.
Won't you get it right let down if there's no answer?
Sure, what odds? I can always sneak in behind the childer. No, it's not the next puddle that worries me at all. It's this one. Aye, this glorified kip of a city.